In this lecture, we're going to set up our high score and make it so that it saves between different runs of the game. Now you could use a singleton to set up the high score to keep it persistent through different rooms, but that wouldn't keep it persistent through different runs of the game. And I wouldn't generally recommend that method anyways. Singletons can be used for certain specific cases where they're useful, but we should do our best to avoid them if we can, and this is a scenario where we can definitely avoid them. So, well, admittedly, we are going to use a singleton for saving and loading data, but we're not going to use that singleton to store the data, just to save it to a file. So let's create a new script. So come to Script and come to File, New Script. We'll call this new script Save and Load. So this will be a script for saving and loading some data. And up at the top, we're going to learn about dictionaries in Godot. And here you can create a new variable. We'll call it default save data. And we can put curly brackets like this. And you might be like, whoa, curly brackets, that's unusual, because in Godot we use the colons in order for functions and stuff. But when you're creating a dictionary, it's a list of data, and it's a collection of key value pairs. So you have a key and then you have a value. So we're going to give it a key of high score and a value of 0. And you can nest these. So you could create another dictionary inside of here called like test, and it could have its own list, its own collection of key value pairs, a equals 5 or whatever. To access these, you would then, we need a comma right here though, in order to differentiate between these two right here. But in order to access these, you can use, there's two ways to access them. You could do print default save data, default save data dot test dot a. So you can use the dot accessor like this. We'll have to convert this to a string. Let's save that, come to project settings, create a new auto load. This time we're going to select our script, which will just be save and load. Here it is, save and load. So our script, we can open that and it will name it save and load, and we'll add this singleton. So now this is another auto-loaded singleton that we have. And so it will run right when the game runs. Let's run the game here real quick. And in its ready, it printed 3. And that's because we accessed this value by doing default save data dot test dot a. And that stepped down through this nested dictionary. And if you remember earlier in the course, I talked about the GDScript website. In the documentation, the page on GDScript, it goes in depth about, it talks a lot more about dictionaries and different things you can do with them. You can also access a value using a string to access it via string, and you would do that like this: default save data, and then brackets, and then a string value here, high score. And this is a little bit uglier in my opinion for accessing stuff. This will obviously print 0 when we run the game. However, since this value right here is a string, you can make it a variable. So you could say var a equals high score, high score like this. And then this could be dynamic. Basically, you could change this while the game is running. So that's the benefit of using brackets. My advice to you is to always use the dot accessor unless you need it to be dynamic, and then you use this way. So let's run the game and let's look at one more thing here. While we're on the subject of singletons, let's look at our remote inspector. And if you look at the remote, you can now see that our singleton nodes are attached to the root node. And this is our actual start menu root node from the scene. So they get loaded in like this. And so if you have a lot of singletons, you'll have a whole list of them here. And once again, you want to try and avoid having a lot of them. Let's move on and start actually writing some code here. Oh, one more thing actually, you can have arrays here as well. So you can do an array inside of a dictionary. Something like this. And then you could then access this by doing default save data dot test and then your array accessor and then whatever index you wanted to access. So 4 would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be the 5 here. If we print, it should show 5 down here. Okay, now we're going to, now we can get rid of this because our dictionary is going to be very simple. It's just going to contain a high score. So we're going to need another variable here though. This will be a const and it's going to be our save data path. And we'll just make it save data.json like this. So it will be a JSON file. If you don't know a lot about JSON files, you'll want to look them up. But basically, they're very similar to the dictionaries that we just discussed, and they work in a very similar way. They're a collection of key value pairs. And Godot can convert between dictionaries and JSON files quite easily using some functions, and you'll see those functions here soon. So let's create a function called save data to file. We'll pass in our save data, and we'll need to get a JSON string from our save data. So var JSON string equals to JSON save data. So this takes our save data, converts it to a JSON string. Perfect. Now we'll say var save file equals file.new. So we're creating a new file object, which just is an object for helping us work with files. And we'll say save file.open. Now we need to give it a path. So save data path. And we want to write. We're writing to this file because we're saving. So you only need to write to the file when you're saving. You don't need to load anything. So we'll say save file.store line JSON string save file.close. And that's it. So we open the file for writing. We save the JSON string that we got from our save data up here, and then we close the file. We're ready for loading. Load data from file. Here we're going to do save file equals file dot new. We'll create another file just like we did before. Then we'll say if not save file dot file exists. Save, and then we need to pass our path, save data path. So we need to check to make sure that this file actually exists. Does this file exist? If not, return default save data, which will just be a high score of 0, right? It's just going to return this dictionary. However, if the file does exist, we're going to do save file.open, save file path, data path, file.read this time, save data. Let's see. And we need to create an empty dictionary here. Let's get rid of that. Var save data equals parse JSON save file dot get as text. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. So this part makes sense, right? We check to see if the file exists. If it doesn't, we return this default save data saying, oh, you don't have any save files, so just return an empty high score. If we do have a save file, then we want to open it for reading, and then we want to convert the file. Parse JSON converts the file from a JSON back to a dictionary, like the one we have up here. One that Godot can work with and read. And this get as text just allows us to get the entire file as a string, because parse JSON actually takes a string value and converts it to a dictionary. But it's expecting a string value because JSON is really just one big string value, but it's structured in a way that it's structured in a specific way. It's not obviously random. It's structured in a specific way, and parse JSON knows how to handle a string file that's written using proper JSON validation and formatting. So we're converting it from a text basically back to a dictionary. Once we've done that, we can say save file.close. We don't need our file anymore. Better make sure to close it, and return save data. So we can return our save data. Now, how do we use this? The first thing we'll want to do is come into our world script. And inside our world script, we're going to have a function in here. And we'll call it update. We'll make a couple functions. We'll make one called update score label. This one will just run this right here. We'll call update score label, like that. And the reason I'm making this into a function is because we're going to use it in another spot. I think. Maybe we don't. Oh well. Func update save data. So this function will update our save data. So we'll say var save data equals save and load data from file. So let's take a minute to talk about this. This right here, we have access to this node directly because it's a singleton. We can just name it and call functions from it. And that's the point of singletons. So this right here will say, it will try to load our save data from the file, right? And then store that dictionary inside of save data. If it can't, it will just do our default save data, which will be loaded, but that's fine as well. We can take default data. Then we'll say if score is greater than save data dot high score. Remember how we can access variables or keys inside of our dictionary using the dot operator. That's what we're doing. You can kind of think of dictionaries actually as objects that don't have any functions. They don't have any functions. They're just a big list of variables, basically. And sometimes they can have variables inside of other variables, or sometimes their variable is another dictionary, another object. But yeah, so you can think of them that way. So we're getting the save data object and checking its high score value. It's really a dictionary. So there is a difference, but that might help you visualize it better in your head. And so then we can say save data.highscore equals score. So if our current score is higher than the save data score, we want to update the high score, and we want to do save and load dot save data to file save data. So we load in the save data. If our current score is better than the high score, we update the high score inside of the save data, and then we save that back to the file. Now that's pretty easy, right? But we need to make sure we call this function or else it won't do anything. We'll call it right when our player dies before we change scenes. Update save data. Once we've done that, we can come back to our game over screen. And in here, game over screen, inside of our script, we're going to want to have a ready function. This is where we're going to call set high score label. So we'll need to get access to our high score label on ready var high score label, equals high score label. So we'll get access to it right here. Better make that function though, set high score label. This is just going to, what do we need to do here, right? We need to load in our save data, get the high score from it, and then set that to the high score label. That's all we're going to do. Var save data equals save and load dot load data from file high score label dot text equals high score plus str save data dot high score. We got to convert it to a string here too. And that's it. And we should be good to go. Could run our game. Our current score is 0. So let's set a high score. Okay. Got a high score of 10. Let's wait for this enemy to come hit me. Dang, it feels like they move awfully slow, doesn't it? Once the enemy hits me, we'll go to the next room. Our high score is 10. Perfect. Let's run the game and see what happens if we just die right away. Want to know something funny? We could actually come over here, come to remote, find the ship, and delete it. Come back to the game, and the ship dies. It says our high score is 0. That's not right. Or maybe we can't do that. Maybe I just deleted our whole world scene. That would be tragic. Okay, here it is. Seems fine. Better be careful what I'm doing. It should update scene changes, but I don't know if it works exactly the way that I was trying to do it. That might have been a terrible idea. So let's die here. And we still get a high score of 0. So something's not working. That's honestly a good thing because this is quite a bit of code to write here. So let's check to see if loading the data from the file is working properly. So we'll come into our world. We'll come in. Well, let's look at the data. I wanted to do this anyways. So we can come into our documents here. Let's see. App data. Here we go. So you want to get to your app data folder. And for me, that's under this PC, local disk, users, my username, app data. But this folder is hidden, so you actually have to type it in up here manually like this. Usually I just go to my username folder and then add the /app data. And we can come in local, and there's going to be a whole bunch of save data stuff in here from a bunch of video games and whatnot. So let's come into, we should have one called, there should be one called Godot. And I don't remember exactly which. It might not be under local. It might be under roaming. Here we go. Here's Godot. Don't know what's inside of here. App user data. So Godot app user data. And there should be a space shooter one here. You guys only have one, so it should be easier. And it says it is empty. The folder is empty. That's interesting. We must not be... Are we ever saving the data? We update save data right here. And we call save data to file. So our save data to file must not be working properly. Let's look it over and make sure that we're going properly here. To JSON, file.new. Okay, you know what? I feel really silly now. But I guess this is a perfect learning example for you guys, because that error message wasn't very helpful to the problem. At least not that I could tell. So let's talk about the problem here. So here's our error message, right? The error message just says condition if is true, and it's just this doesn't give us a lot of information, right? What do you mean condition if is true? It's not. This must be kind of, I don't know. But the problem is that our save data path right here doesn't have that. That's it. I forgot the colon right there. And I'm like 90% sure that this will now fix it. We can get rid of here where we print the save data and run the game. And let's create a high score this time. Yeah. Okay. High score of 10. Got no error message. There's our high score of 10. If we close the game, come into here, come into our space shooter. Space. We might have to go back and then come back in. Space shooter right here. There still seems to be no file here. We didn't get an error message, so we're making progress. Let's try beating our high score. No. Let's just close now. No, let's try beating it. Oh no, we should have tried not beating it, because now we show a high score of 20. So we gotta not beat the high score. Let's just die. High score is still 20, so it is saving the file. And we should be seeing it here. That was my understanding, but maybe it's saved under a different space shooter. Aha. So it turns out I'm fairly certain that it saves it in app data if you have exported the project. However, if you're running your project in Godot like this and haven't exported it, it seems to be saving it right in your project folder right here. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm fairly certain. So you can see our save data.json file right here. I'm going to open it up, and we've got high score is 20, and it's properly saving and loading our high score now. Oh goodness, sometimes the life of a programmer, right? So let's see if we can get a better high score. We'll die. Got a high score of 50. If we start again and die, our high score is 50. If we close the game, run it again, die, our high score is still 50. So you can see our high score system is now functioning properly the way it should be. Let's take out our insta death button for the ship right here. We'll just remove this, and we'll save the game, and that's going to be it for this lecture here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We've made quite the little game here. It's got a little bit of polish. It's got a little bit of everything. The other games that we made, I mean, they weren't really games, right? They didn't have start menus. They didn't have game over screens. They didn't have the things that games need to feel like an actual game. They didn't have sound effects or polish, particle effects. So we've done a very broad, everything that you kind of need to have a game on this. And it's been a fun little project. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next lecture.